let's start with breathing. I imagine the breathing in the pool is different than breathing in the open water because you've got to deal with wind and waves and stuff. So what's the deal with how to breathe when you're swimming open water?
So the process is, as you can imagine, just the same. It just depends on things like waves and sun. Essentially, those are the two things that might affect someone's breathing pattern. So if you can only breathe one way, it becomes a bit of an issue in the open water. So I'd always recommend that people learn how to breathe both sides. It doesn't mean that you have to be a bilateral breather all the time, but it just means that if you have the skill to be able to breathe the other way, so say if waves are coming at you and you just constantly get mouthfuls of water, most open water swims are salty swims anyway, so the last thing you want is to be taking in loads of salt water, or if the glare of the sun is just blinding you every time you breathe one way. So being able to breathe the other side is really helpful from those perspectives, but then also from a racing perspective, being able to breathe both sides also gives you a much clearer idea of where everyone else is in the race. A bit like in a pool, if your main competitor is 2 or 3 lanes down the side and you only breathe to one side, you find a point in the race that if you need to check where they are. So it's a really good skill to be able to breathe both sides, but it's not necessary. But like I said, it's really helpful if you've got waves hitting you.
For sure, absolutely. Now, what about sighting? I imagine lifting your head constantly is slower. You wouldn't want to do that in the pool. So, how do you sight, and then how do you train for that as well?
Yeah, so sighting is a huge skill. I'd say I always get asked how should I change my front crawl? You wouldn't change your front crawl when it comes to open water. There's a few things that might affect that. But the thing that does change is that you have to get used to sighting. And the act of sighting is literally lifting your head above the water. Now, what happens to our bodies when we lift our heads up, essentially, is that the back of our body sinks down. So the higher your head comes out, the more impact that's going to have on your body, which means the more water you're going to drag through, it's going to be harder. So that kind of water polo stroke, so head out the water doing water polo, is kind of the worst thing to do for an event anyway. From a safety perspective, if you really need to see something, maybe there's some jet skis around or something like that, then that's the best form of sighting. But it is going to have take a lot of energy from you to lift your head out, that much of your body out. So essentially the main thing when it comes to sighting is to try and lift the head up as little as possible. So I always think this term is not the best for open water, but we kind of call it crocodile eyes. So you're just literally trying to lift your eyes out of the water. So we're minimizing that as much as possible. But again, crocodile eyes. I usually get some raised eyebrows when I mention that word when we talk about open water swimming.
No, it makes sense totally. Do you add that into your pool training?
Yes. So I would, a month before any kind of major 10K, I would be practicing that in training. So it'd be like a drill. So if you're doing a set of drills or doing like some long swimming, every sort of, 4th or 5th 50 would be sighting. So it'd be lifting my head up, getting used to that. So that, because the effect that it has is depending on which side you breathe mostly on, but the act of lifting your head up is triggered by the arm in front of you. And if you know anything about injuries with swimming, it's usually the complete opposite thing that ends up hurting. So because I was more of a left side breather and I'd use my right arm as the lean to, my left hip flexor would be ruined after a 10K, especially if I haven't done one for ages. So it's just about getting my body used to that in the lead up to swims, and then just practicing, making sure I could sight on the other arm as well.